A lot of times people wonder how they ended up in their situation. And a lot of times they just never saw themselves as becoming a victim of domestic violence. But I do want to go over the top three types of characteristics or personality types that I've seen land in unhealthy domestic violence type of situations. I'm J20, a licensed psychotherapist, and I have over 10 years of helping people heal from unhealthy relationships. So, as I mentioned, there's a few different, I would say, personalities that tend to fall into unhealthy relationships. Again, it's not that these folks go looking necessarily for unhealthy partners, but because of these personality types, a lot of times they find themselves in a situation where there's a lot of power and control going on and unfortunately abuse within their relationship. So by the end of this video, you should know what these top three are. And if you identify with one of these or maybe with multiple, those are things to consider, right? So a lot of times when I'm working with survivors, we talk about risk factors, but we also talk about protective factors, right? So if you learn that you might have some of these risk factors in your personality type, I think it's a good signal or it's something for you to think about as far as what are the protective factors that you can try to implement in your life, right? So the first type, these are folks that are very nurturing. So we probably all have these type of people in our life. I have sisters, and one of them is just so kind, so nice. She's always been very nurturing, right? So those are the type of people I'm talking about, where like they're just almost motherly, right? They like to take care of folks. They like to be considerate, and that's the thing, right? They have this type of mindset where they're just able to be very considerate and look after folks and take care of their needs. And so a lot of times this type of personality type will open the door for an abuser, right? They will notice that this person is very nurturing, is very kind, is very generous. And a lot of times that's an open door, right? For an abusive partner or an unhealthy person to take advantage of that. So again, it's not a bad thing to be nurturing, and just recognize that essentially for someone that is looking for a victim, right? They're going to notice, okay, this person is already letting me get close without having to do too much, manipulation or deception. This is just who they are. They open their door. So that is the first type to consider is, are you overly nurturing? Or do you have friends or family that are overly nurturing? If so, again, that's something to consider that it's a risk factor, right? And the world needs more kind people. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to put off the wrong impression that we don't want people to be nurturing and kind and, again, have that kind of maternal approach, right? Just recognize that it is a potential slippery slope. That if you are too nurturing, too motherly, too forgiving, that essentially allows a person that is an abuser to do what they do, which is take advantage of the situation and exert power and control over situations or over the person themselves. The other type is, these a lot of times I've seen this where these are folks that maybe they left home early, maybe they like ran away in their early teen years, or they were very sheltered, by their family or their caregivers. And so they don't have a lot of life experience. And so you can almost categorize this as being naive, right? They just don't know how the real world works in the sense of they don't know the type of people that are out there, right? And so they might be very open to looking for a connection or very much seeking validation from others, right? So they're just naive to the way people work. And it's not all people, don't get me wrong. Again, there's a ton of great people in the world, but there's also a lot of hurt people that hurt people. And so when they come across a person that's naive or just seems like they're, as some would say, wet behind the ears, again, it's an open door. And that's the thing about abusers, which I'll talk about in another video, that they do prey. There are predators out there where they're looking for folks that are vulnerable. They're not looking for the tough targets, right? They want to find folks that are essentially going to be easy to manipulate, easier to isolate, those type of things. So when you think about this second type of person that's like naive or doesn't have a lot of real world experience, that is kind of what happens, right? And so a lot of times in those situations, once there is some abuse that happens, now this person is more than likely going to be scared, right? They were not prepared for that. And so now, especially if they are like a runaway or someone that, moved in with this partner because they were tired of being held down by their parents, things like that. a lot of times this is where they're scared and now they feel stuck in the relationship, right? So that naivete kind of leads into them being abused and then scared to leave, right? Because they don't know what else is out there in the world and they'd rather stick it out with this abuser than try on their own. And, and I'll get into this last type. And this one, again, these are good traits to have, but they're potential risk for abuse, right? So the last type I would say are those that are loyal, right? They're very committed. A lot of times I've seen these folks, they might have a lot of their values and beliefs might come from the streets, right? Where they are just from the type of, community or the type of family where the values are placed on staying with your partner no matter what, right? So a healthy, unhealthy. So a lot of times it's kind of like a ride or die type of partner, right? Where no matter what, they're not going to leave their partner. And like I said, I've seen a lot of these clients, be like gang affiliated where, so you might not know, but a lot of domestic violence programs, people get court mandated to go into these programs, right? Especially if you get, children's services involved, they might say, hey, if you don't go into a program, we're going to take your children from you. And so a lot of times these are this third type of person where they don't really see that they have a problem. They don't believe that they have a problem. And they're going to stick by their partner no matter what you tell them. And I would even say there's some that they do recognize that it's an unhealthy relationship. They do recognize that there's abuse happening, but they are just committed to that person and they're not gonna snitch, they're not gonna call the police. These are the type of victims where when the police show up, they'll say everything's okay, even though they might be bleeding or have a broken limb, things like that, right? And so again, these are just some personal traits to look out for, character traits to look out for. Some people are very nurturing, some people are naive, and then some people are just very loyal. And these are the types, like I said, it's not always all bad to have these things going on in your personality or your approach to life or other people, but just trying to share this insight so that you can see the potential open door that it can cause. And really, the deeper we go into this knowledge, we'll understand that it just comes down to boundaries, right? Are you able to be assertive with your boundaries? And if you think about the three types of individuals I just described, and again, I've seen folks that have all three of these in their personality, right? They're motherly and nurturing. They're also naive to just the way people can be cruel and mean, but then they're also very loyal and committed, right? So some people, again, they have all these going on, but something that's common across the three, I would say, is they could all be challenged with being assertive with boundaries, like I said, where they just might feel if I put this boundary down, then I'm not loyal, I'm not committed to my partner. If I put this boundary down, what's going to happen? I don't know. I've never had a boundary, put up towards someone and I don't know what's going to happen. Or it's, I don't want to hurt this person. I don't want to put up the boundary because they need me. Right. So things to consider. But like I said, just wanted to bring that to the forefront. Check out the next video where we'll talk about what are some traits of abusers. Stay safe. And I don't know everything, but I am going to share everything I know to help you stay safe, recognize some red flags, and find healthy love. If you need any type of support or resources, please check out, the slide that'll come up right now. It's really important with DV that you do know where to turn to if you are ready to get out of your situation. But please be mindful of safety. That's our always priority number one. But yeah, thanks for viewing, and I'll see you next video.